Welcome to the Decide to Move podcast, helping entrepreneurs like you make smart, pivotal shifts in your life and business. Tune in each episode for inspiring stories from brilliant business minds and trailblazers to find out how they made their big moves and how you can too. Now, here's your host, author, speaker, business strategist, CEO, and founder of Decide to Move, Monica M. Bijou.
Take off my glasses because I always have a glare. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Decide to Move podcast. I am here today with a very special guest, and I know I always say my guests are special, but they truly are because they come with so many great information, tips, strategies, and tools and things that they use in their own business. And they're here to bring you some stuff that's going to actually help you grow and actually make some changes. And today is no exception. I have a great guest that is here to talk to you about how to actually make that exit strategy when you need to leave your business. She actually is a CEO and co-owner and a CEO of a family-run business. And so she's going to tell you all about that. But without further ado, help me welcome Ashley Micciche. So I always say it's like Michigan, but you add a little to it. Hi, Ashley. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Monica. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
Most definitely, most definitely. I'm glad that you're here. So if you can introduce yourself to the audience and tell them who you are and where you currently residing.
Sure. So, as you said, I'm the CEO of True North Retirement Advisors, and our specialty is we do retirement and exit planning for business owners. So, a lot of business owners, they're running their business 10, 20, 30 years, and then they get to the end and they think, okay, well, what now? And most business owners only exit their business once. And so, our job is to help them build that strategy, build the plan, implement the plan that's going to give them the best chance of success for exiting their business and what their particular goals are. So it's really, what we do. There's a lot of planning around it, but it's crafting this roadmap that allows owners to basically transfer their business in a way that's consistent with their values. So what's their timeline? Who's their ideal successor? Um, there's so many decisions that business owners need to make. And so we put in place that roadmap that allows them to make progress on their exit and eventually exit with the money that they need and selling to the person that they want and desire on the timeline that works for them. So that's the goal of a good exit plan.
It's great. And it's a family-run business. So how long have you been doing this?
I've been in the business since 2007. So in 2007, I graduated college. I got a finance degree at Portland State. I'm Portland, Oregon native, grew up here. I still live here, went to college here, never left. And so after college, I joined my father in his financial advisory practice. And at the time he and I, so when I joined him, we worked for a big firm. And then we continued that way for about a decade. And then in 2018, the very beginning of 2018, we launched True North, which is a boutique firm, because we found that we just couldn't work with our clients in a way that we wanted to, being handcuffed and tied to the restrictions of a large financial firm. So that's how True North came to be. And it was crazy because we it took about 2 years of planning to execute on that vision and start our firm. And once that train left the station, there's no getting off. We were working towards this timeline. Well, I have about a little over a year into the planning, I got pregnant with my second child, and he was born 3 months prior to when we launched True North. So I was juggling my first child, who was 3 at the time, this newborn, this new business. Our one and only employee left in the first like 2 weeks. So we joked that it wasn't True North, it was True South. Like I just made this huge mistake. So yes, and hopefully a lot of your, well, maybe not hopefully, but I'm sure a lot of your listeners can identify with that, where it's running a business, starting a business, growing a business. There's a lot of bumps and bruises and tears and sweat along the way, but it's a lot of fun too. So I love it, and I love helping business owners because they're all so unique and different.
Most definitely. It's like actually having a baby. I always say that my business is my baby because it's like you have to nurture, you have to take care of it. Things happen that you don't expect, and you're constantly having to make juggles and stuff like that. And everything that you described reminds me of having another child. So you actually had three little ones that you
Yeah.
were basically managing in that time. So did you always feel that you wanted to go in finance, or was it something that was kind of pushed up on you?
Yeah, it was accidental. So my dad he learned his lesson early on, I think, because I'm kind of a stubborn person, and if I don't really want to do it, I'm not going to do it. And I remember when I was little, he pushed me with golf. I was a pretty good golfer, and he thought that, I if I applied myself and practiced and did all the right things, maybe I could play golf in college or, what have you. And I thought, I don't want to do that. And so I pushed back, and we had, some conflict over that. So he learned that right away, that if you push me into something I don't want to do, I'm just going to push back. And so he would plant these little seeds. Like I remember sometimes if my mom was out of town or something, he'd take me to a client appointment, and I'd be sitting there like a fly on the wall. And he would introduce me, this is Ashley. She's going to take over for me someday. And I'd be like, no, I'm not. I'm going to do whatever I thought I was going to be at the time. And so he never pushed me really hard. He just kind of planted these little seeds. But then when I went to college, I decided I wanted to major in business, not because I knew what I wanted to do, but just because I knew it would be a degree that would be applicable to whatever I decided. And then I took my first finance class in college, and I was hooked because I loved the finance is really interesting because there's the economic side of it, there's the numbers side of it, and like the statistics and the calculations of the formulas. But then there's also this softer people side to it. And in school and finance, they don't train you towards helping people with their finances, which is basically what I do now. It's more towards analyzing companies, valuation, which is great because I have that educational background that had no idea at the time would massively apply to working with business owners and helping them value their companies, and making a plan to grow the value, extract the most value, transfer that business. So it kind of marries all of those things that I never expected it to. And so that's why, 13 years into being an advisor, I'm still doing it because I really like it. And um, it is a lot of fun.
It sounds fun. It's so funny because I'm a therapist, but also a business coach, and I have a master's in human resources and a master's in social work, right? Totally opposite sides. And I remember some of my favorite classes, but also I'm a math nerd too. And it's like, when you take those career tests, it's tells me I either should be a counselor or an accountant. And I'm like, how are those totally two different? But I think based on my personality being psychologically androgynous, it got it right because I literally freak out over numbers. I love teaching people, about finances. And I remember my daughter when she was like 17, 18, she would actually bring her friends over to the house and be like, okay, mom, I'm about to teach them how to balance their account. And I'm like, okay, 17-year-old, 18-year-old teaching her friends how to actually manage their money at a young age. And that was my beginning of realizing that it does add value of teaching and helping people because it is not really taught a lot in school about the relationship portion of financing, which is
Mhm.
basically what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, being not taught these things in school, just like what your daughter was teaching her friends. It's sad to me that those concepts aren't taught in school because we need to know them.
Hmm.
And, there's so many Americans today, we just can't seem to get out of this sort of debt and overspending rat race that so many of us live in. And there's a consistent statistic, about 40% of Americans would be unable to cover a $400 emergency without having to put it on a credit card. And so, we don't have enough savings in the bank. We don't manage our finances well. We spend a lot. We tend to very easily and very quickly go into debt. And so you know, it's challenging, but having those right habits, they're, like the millionaire habits are super important, and business owners can apply them, and individuals can apply them. So that's kind of a lot of what we do too, is identifying what are your strong points, where are your weak points. Most business owners are so focused on running their business that sometimes their books and their accounting records and all that, unless they've hired a rock star, are can be messy too, and that's not good for trying to sell your business or transfer it, or do anything really.
Yeah, I was listening to Dave Ramsey one time, and he was talking about a guy balancing his book, and he kept seeing like ESP, and he was like, ESP, who is this person you're paying this money to? He was like, error someplace. Because he's like, I don't know, I'm short $400, so we're gonna put ESP as the person who we gave this money to, because he couldn't get it together and learn how to like really balance his books. And so
Yeah.
I'm just grateful that I always was a math person that loved that kind of stuff. And so I'm like geeking out over here when you're talking about all stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so exciting. So you mentioned earlier, like you actually work with helping people with a planned exit strategy. Can we start off by talking to those that had to make a strategy exit earlier than they intended to due to the pandemic?
Yeah, so a good exit plan will account for those variables and the unexpected. So, one question that I think business owners always need to ask themselves is, what happens to my business if something happens to me? What if I get COVID? What if I die? What if I become permanently disabled and I can no longer work in my business? What will happen to my business? What will happen to my family? And there are protections you can put in place. A lot of people just immediately think about insurance, but there are so many other things. It's more complicated than that, and more nuanced too. So, yes, I think one of the blessings of COVID is that it has helped us all sort of think about this. Like, most of us have thought about what would happen to me, what would happen to my business if I got COVID, if I died. I remember being really fearful, especially in those early weeks, about who's going to get sick, and am I at risk, and all these things, and my parents and so it's scary, and a lot of us have thought about our own mortality, I'm sure, many times, and that's a really critical thing to do, because we all live in denial that we're not going to die. Well, 100% of entrepreneurs, business owners are going to exit their business. It's a fact. It's just, when do you do that? And is it on your terms? Is it on your timeline? Or is it some unforeseen thing that happens? So, I had actually the catalyst for doing more exit planning and going deeper with my clients. About 7 years ago, I had a client, and I was just managing their 401k at the time. I didn't really have much other to do with their business other than being their 401k consultant. And I got a call one day because the business owner had died very suddenly of a heart attack. He was only in his early 50s, and the business stayed afloat, but his wife had to come in and run it. She was a retired school teacher, had never worked in the business before in her life. The kids, upended their lives to come help keep the business afloat. There was a lot of employees that worked there for like 20, 30 years and were very close to retirement. Well, 3 years later, the company sold we're on the West Coast. They sold to a competitor on the East Coast for like pennies on the dollar from what it was worth before. And they were just limping along and trying to keep things afloat. Finally found a buyer. Shortly after the transaction closed, the new buyer laid off all of these long tenured employees. So it just had this massive catastrophic trickle down effect to the business owner's family, his employees, everybody. It was very sad to kind of, I just watched from afar, and just watched all of this happen. And there are a couple simple things that he could have done that would have helped shore up that business and not put them under such pressure and strain to try to sell the business quickly and to get out. So a good exit plan will address the unexpected, as well as, okay, well, if the timeline works out and you end up exiting and retiring exactly when you want to, and all of that, and everything in between. So we want to address those issues as well.
Wow. So, what are some of the things that people like for startup businesses, those that are just starting up? Is there things that they can actually start doing from the very beginning to actually start working towards that instead of waiting till way later?
Hmm. Yeah, ideally, you would do what Stephen Covey said, which is begin with the end in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a smart way to begin your business. And because I'm sort of wired that way, when we created True North, we thought about it. What does the business look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? What does a succession plan look like? And it's very, very important for owners to do that from the very beginning, to have that long term focus and the long term vision. It's very hard in practice, though, because in the early days, you're just trying to get customers and clients and scrape by, and it's the rare unicorn that hits a home run right out of the gate. So it's usually a lot of years of just plodding away, and maybe you have something here or there that kind of skyrockets you to the next level. But generally, it's kind of this long-term slow slog in growing your business. So yes, so specific things that owners can do from the very beginning. One is understanding what grows value in the business. So it's always about the two primary drivers of value are revenue and pre-tax income within the industry that you're in. So are you profitable? How quickly can you get to profitability? And what is it going to take in your specific industry to do that sooner rather than later? If you have a business partner and employees, I find that a lot of new business owners, just because they don't know what they don't know, are really sloppy when it comes to having the right legal documentation in place. So, if you have a business partner, do you have a buy sell agreement? If you have employees, have they signed employment agreements? What are the laws in your state as it pertains to like non competes and things like that? And making sure that you're doing everything possible to protect the business, to protect you, and to protect the other business partners as well, especially if there's multiple people. And so the proper legal documentation is critical for that. But I find that because the budget is pretty low in the beginning, and there's usually no budget, um, those things just don't get done. It's the business is done on a handshake basis. And you don't have to look far to see where that did not work out, and where it ruined the business and ruined the owners as well when someone up and leaves.
Yeah, that is so true. I have a friend that's an attorney, and that's one of the things that she says business divorces are the worst, like literally. And people often don't think about that. It's like, oh, my friend and I were going to get into a business. Even if you're getting into a business with your spouse, what happens if the two of you get a divorce, or or any other things happen? What happens then? Like, does the kids get part of it? Especially if you separate, there's just so many nuances. And so that's one thing that I've learned very clearly and very early. Thank goodness I don't have a business partner, because of the fact that I don't know. I don't know. It's me, my stuff and what I do. It's not really like, maybe I'll have coaches that end up working underneath me, or, but they're their own independent kind of stuff and having independent contracts. But I think a lot of people oversee that aspect of when you're doing partnerships, looking at the end in mind and the what ifs. If things happen where we're not together, hey, we need to make sure that these documents are in place.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Oh, yeah. So, what are some other strategies that you feel that business owners need to know to start moving towards that exit strategy?
Yeah, so we've already talked about it a little bit. And the primary advice, the best advice I could give business owners at any stage is to know the value of your business. Because if you're embarking, let's say you're 5 to 10 years out away from wanting to exit your business. Well, knowing what your business is worth today is a critical piece of information, because then you can decide, okay, well, if I just kind of if things just kind of continue on the trajectory that we're on for another 5, 10 years, however long is that going to be? Is that going to be enough? Is my business going to be worth enough at that future date in order to be able to exit? Or do I really need to kick it into gear and grow this business? What if I'm in an industry that is a kind of a low or stagnant growth business? Like, right now there's a lot of uncertainty with like brick and mortar retailers, restaurants. You have all of these travel industry, everything that just got blindsided by COVID. And so you may be in an industry where it's kind of bleak, at least for now. And so what are some other things? It doesn't, if the value is not going to be where you need it to be, you at least need to know what the business is worth now and what the trajectory is, so that if you are unable to get the business value to where it needs to be in 5 to 10 years, what can you do outside of the business? Can you save more, in your 401k plan or some other type of savings vehicle? Can you decide that you're going to work longer, and instead of a 5-year timeline, maybe it's a 10 or a 15-year timeline? So there are all things, I call it filling the gap. What is the gap of between what you have today and what you're going to need to have when you retire? And is the current trajectory that you're on going to get you there, or do we need to shift gears a little bit? So that's very important. That's always the first step, because if you bury your head in the sand about what your business is worth, or just kind of hope and pray and, I hope in 10 years I'm going to get there, it's just not going to happen. And every like yourself, every coach, every consultant will tell you that, like, if you don't have a strategy, if you don't have a game plan and something concrete that you can execute on, you're not going to reach your goals. It's very, very unlikely that that's going to happen. And so the same thing is true for your business exit as well. So you have to know where you are today, and you have to know, well, what do I need to do to get to where I want to be when I want to exit?
Have you actually experienced someone, well, right now with COVID and the pandemic happening, are you actually finding yourself having to like think scramble for people, like really help them? Like, have more people been coming to you now than before the pandemic happened, or has it been about the same?
I would say it's about the same. However, I have a couple of clients who are having their best year ever, just because of the nature of the business that they're in and the luck of the draw that they're in. I had a client who had to exit his business. He was near retirement age anyways, but he was planning to work a couple more years. But he's older, so he's in the high risk category, and he was in the medical field, and a lot of his patients were older too. And so he kind of had this surprise accelerated exit because of COVID, and he couldn't retire anymore. And so there are just it's sort of like COVID has really kind of drawn this line where, if you're on one side of the table, COVID is an amazing growth accelerator for you. And if you're like the other 90% of businesses, it's hurting you and it's upending your plans, or maybe accelerating your retirement. Or the flip side of that is sort of forcing you to really kind of build back your business after this, and not knowing when you're gonna be able to start building it again, because you're kind of still in the depths of the shutdown and the COVID and the lost revenue and the lost business. So there's just it's challenging, but it's interesting. And I our clients kind of cross the whole spectrum of, I'm needing to exit now. I don't know that I'm going to get through this, all the way to best year ever. My company is worth twice what it was a year ago. So, and everywhere in between.
Yeah, I've been seeing that a lot, the different disparities and stuff like that. It does make a big, huge difference. And I think, for me, I find that this topic is so important because people who used to take things for granted really have to start looking at what's, like, really looking at their actual plan. And when they're doing their business plan or whatever, they need to like really look at the end and the end goal in mind. What exactly do I want to see happen 10 years, 5 years, or whatever? Do you feel like there's a certain amount of time that people need to kind of reevaluate their financial? Should it be like every year, every 5 years, 10 years? Is there a particular number that you foresee that works the best for clients?
I think clients who are a long ways out from their exit, 15, 20 years, every 3 to 4 years, really taking a good in-depth look at where they're at, where they're going, both the business value and where they're at personally with their other assets, and combining those together to see if that's, are they on the right path. Um, Too many people wait until they're 55, 60 before they even start thinking about their retirement and their exit and their finances. And there's good reason for that. You think of different life stages. You come out of college, you maybe have student loans, you're trying to buy a house, then you have a couple kids, and kids are expensive. I have 3 young children and they're not cheap. So you have all these obstacles to this sort of more long-term retirement thinking, and then it's not until, your 40s or 50s. And then, oh, my kids want to go to college now. So I'm going to want to pay for that. And then, I'll figure it out later. And we can't do that. We have to, because if you just put a little bit away, early on, you're not going to have to save nearly as much as you would if you did nothing and then started saving at age 50. So, um, yeah. So to answer your question though, when you're long ways out, every few years is okay to just kind of check in. But then as you get closer in the last like 10 years is critical to look, because you still have a long enough runway at 10 years where if you really need to shift the plan and change it, then you have enough time to make that happen where it's not going to hurt too much. I have a client that I'm working with now that they're at this crossroads. They're wanting to retire and just be done, and but financially they're not where they need to be yet, and so they're going to have to cut their if they want to make this happen, and it's more important for them to retire now, they're going to have to make some significant compromises, reduce their spending and lifestyle in retirement, maybe get a part-time job. It's up to every individual how they kind of plug that gap. But the longer you give yourself, and it was really painful to talk to this client, because they had a lot of sort of guilt around, well, I wish I would have started earlier, and now that I'm here at this finish line, I feel really bad for my spouse that we're not going to live the retirement that we envisioned. And we're still not at this secure place. There's a lot of insecurity around our money and finances, and so there's a lot of pain and guilt and regret there too, and that's difficult. And kind of going back to what we talked about too with the people side of it is understanding, where each client is and where every person is, and just helping them with where they are at, because everybody's at a different place.
Yeah, most definitely. How do you recommend that people protect their value as they're going through everything? Like, what's a good way for them to actually put some safety in the mix?
Sure. So, a couple of things that come to mind right off the bat is diversifying your revenue sources. So, perfect example of I know somebody who had a brick and mortar retail, clothing retail shop. And at lightning speed, when COVID hit, she didn't really have much of an online presence. Like, she had an Instagram account and would post things there, but most of her, pretty much all of her sales were inside of her store. Well, she pivoted very quickly and was able to get this online store up and running and kind of leverage some of the existing relationships that she had. Now, it's not business is not booming for her with her online retail, but she's open and she's alive and her business is alive. And so, she had to just cast everything else aside and focus on this 100%. And it took a lot of courage. And it's tough because in her shoes, she doesn't know that this is going to work out. And it's very scary too, because this whole vision that she had for her business is crumbling right in front of her eyes, and she's having to make this drastic change and compete in a very crowded online retail marketplace. So, um, but I was really proud of her. I kind of been watching over the last few months and how things are going, and she's still in business, and she's selling stuff online, and and still going. So diversifying that. So, a good example of hindsight's always 2020, right? Well, in her example with the retail shop and the online business, building the online business from the very beginning. So she has the different streams of revenue coming from different places. And most businesses have opportunities for more than one stream of revenue. So diversifying your revenue sources and where that money comes from. Um, and some in a similar vein to that would be diversifying your customer base. So sometimes I talk to business owners and they have 5 clients, or they have like 3 clients that make up 90% of their revenue. That's not good for value, and it's extremely risky as well, because what happens if you lose 1 or 2 of those clients? So though those types of diversification in terms of revenue and clientele is very, very important. That will also grow business value. It can hurt business value substantially if you do have a concentration of revenue or clients or customers. So that's one thing. There are just so many things and industry specific that business owners can do. Like another it's kind of low hanging fruit, I think, because existing business owners, no matter what their industry is, they can systematize and build processes around all of the things that they do. So in my business, we have onboarding for clients. We had a client who died this week. So there's a specific process, like standard operating procedures, that we follow to make sure that everything that needs to happen will happen. And then it's super important to scale your business if you can do that, because if everything lives up in your head, it's a very, very high risk. And you cannot scale your business either, because you can't hire people, because you're constantly having to like retrain them. And if somebody leaves, everything's in their head. So then you have to start from scratch every time. So if you have your standard operating procedures and everything documented to the extent that it can be, it allows you to scale your business as well, which also translates to additional value now and in the future.
Yeah, and that's so true that that's the like pretty much the big word is scalable, making your business where it is scalable, that you don't always have to be present. Because like the examples that you've been giving is that having someone who all of a sudden, like with COVID happening, and get super sick, what happens to their business, and no one's able to pick it up and take off and help them, because everything has been in their head and they've kept their own little ways of doing things a little secret. And so if you don't have a good solid team around you, it makes it very difficult.
Right.
Yeah, I know partners that are like that. Like, I can't do this because my partner did it. And it's like, so, and I don't know exactly what they did. So only half of the company is now pretty much operational. Have you ran into something like that?
Oh yeah, and I think there's some psychological issues too. Like, well, if you let's say you have an operations manager and you task that person documenting everything that they did, but maybe they're really protective of their knowledge, and it gives them job security to have all of that up in their head too. So it can be challenging sometimes for a variety of reasons. But yeah, I mean, everybody has their own way of doing things. It's a challenge in my own business. I just caught something yesterday where I'm like, we're doing this all wrong. And I had no idea. And so it's going to be a little fix it project now to fix it. And then we're going to have to get everybody on board with doing it the right way going forward, so we're not back in this boat a year from now. So it's a constant, like iteration of making it better, like document it the first time, but then it's not done. It has to kind of evolve and change as things change over time too. So it's not easy, but a lot of business owners, I find, if you're not a highly organized person, like I'm kind of type A, so I like detailed, do this, then do this, then do this. And so it makes my life more efficient and streamlined and everything. So I like it. And I try to document things that I'm doing as often as I can. knowing that in the future, if there are certain things that I'm currently doing that I don't want to be doing in 1, 3, 5 years from now. So I need to document that and make sure that I can train the next person to do it so that I can get it off my plate when that's appropriate. So every business owner really needs to be thinking that way.
Yeah, most definitely. Are you personally raising any little financial geniuses in your right? Dropping your
No, my oldest is 6, and the only thing that I've done is there's these. I highly recommend it to any parents of young kids. But you can buy there's different kinds, but they're piggy banks, and there's 4 slots in the piggy bank, and one's for saving, one's for investing, one's for spending, and one's for giving. And so when I give my daughter money or she earns money by doing chores around the house, we talk about these things and so she learns about it in a very concrete way. And so we talk about, let's say she gets $1. Okay. So she's putting 10% in the giving, a dime in the giving slot. Maybe she's putting 20 or 30 cents in the spending category because she doesn't have any bills. Right. And then, maybe she's saving 10 or 20 cents as well. And then investing too. So it allows parents of young kids to have those conversations and understand things and help them understand things from a very early age. So there are lots that parents can do to talk about their kids about money to help them understand that. I think the most valuable thing that a parent of a young child can do is to help them understand how money works and the key kind of high level principles around spending, debt, saving, investing. We all come to the table with lots of money baggage. Some of us who, grew up poor, grew up middle class, grew up, rich. We all have sort of these different ideas about money. And then they kind of trickle down to how we teach our kids about money. But educating kids about money is so, so important because it's not happening in schools.
Yeah, you're so right. That's like my daughter learned by the time she was 4, she understood the value of a dollar, and it made such a difference where I didn't have a kid that's throwing tantrums in a store because she wants something and feels like she's obligated to have it. And unfortunately, I've seen so many parents where they'll give in to that, or they'll go through, well, since I didn't have it, I want to make sure you have it. But what are you actually teaching your child? So they end up becoming having a sense of entitlement. This is like a whole conversation we can have on another time when it comes to helping entrepreneur parents really help their child with their finances. Mm-hmm. Most definitely. So Ashley, is there anything that really stands out, that final word that you would want to make sure that people really understand and you can leave them with?
Yeah, so valuing your business is really the first step into starting your exit plan. Even if you're like, I'm not ready to exit, you got to know what your business is worth so that you can make a strategy, make a plan, create a roadmap around it. So, what we've done is we've made it so, so easy for any business owner who wants to value their business. If you go to truenorthra.com/value my business, there's a checklist of information to gather, and then we make a free tool available to anybody who wants to use it. You could find out what your business is worth today. It takes 10 minutes once you gather the data, and it's 100% free. We actually pay for access to the software tool. It's got 50 million businesses in their database, so it's good comparative data. And we pay for that, and we make it available for free to anybody who wants to use it, just because it is that first step to sort of unlocking everything else that you would do in planning for your exit.
That's great. And I'll make sure that it's in the show notes so that way anyone who is listening via their favorite directory or watching this via YouTube can definitely go get it. If you're listening and driving, I recommend that you don't try to write. You can get in the show notes when you get to a safe place. We don't want any accidents happening at all. So Ashley, how can they actually find you and connect with you? Are you on social media, or do they have, like, do you do stuff via like online, or is it mostly in your local area?
Oh, I have clients all over the country. I think we have clients in 25 or 26 states. So I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. But that same link, the truenorthra.com/value my business, all of my contact information is there too. And there's a button there at the top right corner of the page. If you want to book a 20-minute call, it's free to do that anytime, is convenient for you to talk about anything in your business that's weighing on your mind right now. So we want to help business owners make progress towards their exit and help them understand that there are people out there who can actually help them with this.
Most definitely. This has been great. Thank you so much, Ashley. I feel like right now with everything happening, even before things will happen, this was such a huge and important topic that a lot of people don't talk about. A lot of people are not, saying, oh, well, I need to understand the value of my business when they're thinking about getting started. But, at Decide to Move, we're all about getting people like ready in every aspect of their business as well as their life, so that way they can actually be successful. So people like Ashley is here to provide that. So thank you so much, Ashley, for being here with us today. You are amazing. We're definitely going to have to talk some more. I definitely want you to actually even talk about the millionaire habits. I actually give people this millionaire mindset secrets download so that they can actually start getting their mindset correct and right about how you actually make that money, because getting rid of those limiting beliefs, as you mentioned. So thank you so much for joining me. And it definitely has been great.
Thank you so much, Monica. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you. And all my listeners, thank you for joining me for another episode. And as I always say, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Decide to Move podcast with Monica M. Bijou. If you are ready to make a pivotal shift and take your destined position in the world, then schedule a free discovery call by going to www.decidetomove.com. For all links mentioned in today's show and to listen to previous episodes, go to www.decidetomovepodcast.com. And remember, we've all been delivered rotten fruit in our past. We can choose to chew on the rotten fruit trying to convince ourselves it's what we want, or we can become the fruits of our labor and create an incredible, fulfilling, and inspiring life and business out of it. You have what it takes to create the life you want.